Right, so we're going to have a look at my game against J.Rowson at the 4MCL. I've played J.Rowson quite a lot of times before, with mixed results. I'm sure he's got a plus score against me, and I tend to lose to him at the British Championships far too often. But yeah, I thought I'd try the Kings Indian out against him today, and we reached an interesting position very quickly. So I was expecting the sameness variation, as this is what he tends to play in most of his games. And well, before the game, I was deciding what I was going to play against it. In the past, I have played c5 in this position, which is meant to be the main move now. I was a bit worried that he'd know the theory a bit better than me in this variation. I mean, the normal continuation after this pawn sacrifice goes d takes c5, d takes c5, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop takes c5, and now black plays knight to c6. And the general idea is to go knight to d7, attack the bishop on c5, and black's kind of claiming that he's got compensation because white's dark squares mainly are quite weak and white's behind in development. But there is a lot of fear in this, and I know J.Rowson's one of the sort of leading experts, and he's come up with some good ideas in this variation from white. So I wanted to really keep a bit more tension in the game and try to maybe do something that would surprise him a bit more. So after bishop e3, what other options does black have? Well, I've also tried c6 here against Korchnoi at the Simpsons and the Strand. The basic idea here is to go a6 and b5, but I saw that J.Rowson plays quite a good line against this, so I didn't want to go into that. Another idea is knight to c6. This used to be a favourite at Goofield, and this is very interesting. Black again wants to go a6 and b5, but the problem with this line is that basically white can play quite positionally against this. He can continue with something like knight e2, then after a6 he can do something with rook c1, which I see J.Rowson's played before. And I didn't want to go into this again because it seemed a bit like a bit passive, and white's probably got a slight edge here. So what other options? Well, I played e5. Now this is an old move that Kasparov used to play. He had many battles against Karpov from the black perspective in this variation, and I thought, well, this looked quite interesting. A lot of the lines, all the pieces stay on the board, so there's good winning chances, and the position stays extremely complex. So Jonathan now played knight ge2, which I was expecting him to play. The other idea here is a d5, which closes the position up very quickly, and now black should continue with knight to h5, and after queen to d2, f5, white generally castles queenside, and now I thought a very interesting idea here was a6, with the idea of going knight to d7 and then b5 quickly, sacrificing the pawn on the queenside to open up the position. This is just the type of thing that I'd be very happy to play with black pieces. I mean, it's an exciting double-edged kind of position to get. So knight to ge2, which is a very good way to keep the centre under control. I continue to c6. Jonathan now played queen to d2. Then I played knight to b7, which is the main move. Another interesting idea, actually, which maybe stops J.Rowson's idea, would be to go a6 first, with the idea of going b5. I mean, the only reason I didn't want to go into this is because I saw some games where white does the following, takes and goes knight to a4. And after something like knight to b7, you can see from my diagrams that there's a big weakness on b6. Maybe white wants to clamp down the square with knight b6 at some point. But I don't think this position is that bad for black. Black can go bishop to f8 and activates his bishop. But again, this position, this kind of endgame is quite stale and doesn't really suit my style. But I think a6 is a very good alternative here, because there's I play knight to bd7 anyway. At least this keeps the queens on the board, and we can have more fun with the queens on the board. So yeah, let's stick with that option. J.Rowson now played d5. The other option here, I believe, is castling queenside. I don't think my opponent would go for this. He's more of a classical player, J.Rowson, and you know, he's very good in all types of positions, sharp positions and passive positions. But I thought he'd be playing into my hands somewhat in this way. I mean, black now goes something like a6, and after king b1, b5. With the popular move now in this position is c5, with some great complications around here. But you know, black's chances seem to be quite decent here. I mean, both sides are cast on opposite sides of the board, so you're going to have an interesting game, and that's one thing that I'm very happy to have. There was a couple of games that Kasparov had, I could see on the database, where white played knight to c1 as well, and now a general way that black continued here was an idea of something like b4, knight to a4, taken on c5, and then taken on d4, sorry, then c5. and this is a pawn sacrifice. But after bishop takes s6, queen takes bishop to e7. Black's got very good compensation for the pawn here, just because he's got this clamp on d4 square, and a dark square bishop's a very good piece. The pawn is pretty irrelevant here, because it's all about controlling maybe the d4 and e5 squares here. So even though black's pawn down, castle on opposite sides, pretty good compensation for the pawn. So my opponent played d5. I captured on d5, and now I was quite shocked with my opponent's response here. He went knight takes d5. Now, the line I was expecting him to play, and I spent most of the time preparing, was c takes d5, when player continues a6, the idea of going b5, g4, I think it's the best move, and now h5, which leads to some quite dynamic, interesting positions. I spent quite a lot of time on this in the morning, and originally I thought white was doing quite well, and then I changed my mind, and I thought black has quite a lot of resources in this position, which I was interested to try out. But my opponent plays knight takes d5, so Rowson's just trying to get a clamp on the d5 square. So after an exchange, queen takes d5. What's the resulting position like? For a start, I do have a weak d6 pawn, and positionally wise, I'm doing very badly here. My structure's bad, I've got a big hole on d5. But tactically wise, I'm actually doing alright here, because white's king's still stuck in the centre. His bishop on f1's not going to get into the play, and I'm quite well developed, so I've really got to play quite actively here. Now, I spent a lot of time in this position. I knew that knight b6 was the main move here, but I spent a bit of time analysing knight c5. Now, this might be an interesting possibility, another way to play. The idea is if white takes on c5, I'd be very happy now, after sacrificing this pawn, because maybe a continuation like queen to h4 check. I thought I'd have good compensation here on dark squares. My bishop is well worth a pawn. It might come to h6. My rook might come to d8. So I think this would be very good. And the reason I didn't play knight to c5, I was a bit worried about rook to d1 here, which looks like quite a decent plan. I mean, if white castles, then I expect queen a5 offers black some pretty decent counterplay. For example, queen takes d6. Now knight to e6, knight to c3, knight to d4, this kind of thing looked pretty good for black. But I was more worried about this rook to d1 move, and I wasn't sure how to continue here. So after queen takes d5, I continued with knight to b6. My opponent played queen to e5, and now I went bishop to h6. Now this is an interesting option, bishop to h6. I thought my bishop would be better on h6 than it was on g7. The idea is if white captures on h6, I've got a queen h4 check, g3, queen takes h6, and my queen comes into e3, which causes white some problems. So after bishop h6, bishop f2 is an normal move, and I quite like my bishop here on h6 zooming along this diagonal. I thought it was quite an annoying piece for white. And now I continue bishop to e6. I knew the main move here is bishop to d7, but I was a bit worried after something like queen to b3, knight to a4. After this exchange here, I was a bit worried about this position. I mean, maybe it's equal, but it's not the kind of position I wanted against Jonathan. I mean, he'd be very happy playing this, and he's just going to maybe slightly better for white, and really I've got no way to win this game, no way for counterplay. So I thought after bishop f2, bishop e6 would keep more pieces on the board. So knight to c3, rook to c8, b3. This is much superior to knight to d5. I mean, this exchange already this gets rid of any weaknesses I have on the d5 now, d-file, and now after f5 I can get some counterplay straight away on the king side. So I think white should keep the tension with b3, exactly what he does in the game. I now played knight to d7. Now this is an interesting idea. I mean, I wasn't particularly happy with my position here, and I think white's got a slight advantage, so maybe I'll have to look at some improvements of black at an earlier stage. But what can I do? Well, if white's given time to go bishop e2 and castle kingside, then his position is going to be fine. So my knight on b6 seemed like a stupid piece, so I wanted to reroute it around to c5. And also then when the knight comes to c5, I'm putting more pressure on the e4 square, and white's queen on b4 is a bit out of place. And knight to d7 was looked like quite a logical idea at the time. Jonathan played rook to d1, so my knight came to c5, and now Jonathan played queen to b4, which is a very good move. I mean, I didn't expect him to take on c5. I mean, this would have given me far too much counterplay after rook takes c5, queen takes b7, and then something like queen to a5. And this is exactly what white should be avoiding here, allowing my pieces to get active. For example, b4, queen to a3. and White's position is actually going to fall apart here. He's in a lot of trouble, probably losing already, surprisingly enough. So rook to d1, knight to c5, queen to b4, trying to get the queen back around into the game. And this was an interesting position now. I mean, my first thought here was to play pawn to f5. I mean, I played pawn to a6 in the end to stop knight to b5, but maybe pawn to f5 is an interesting option. The move I was worried about was knight to b5. This is the only reason I didn't play it. Otherwise, I might be able to capture on e4 and maybe sacrifice on f2. But knight to b5 is critical. And now let's have a look what happens if I take on e4. So pawn takes e4. And now the move I was worried about most in the game was knight takes d6. I thought if rook takes d6, I'd be able to sacrifice my queen here. And if you looked at some of my other games, you'd probably guess that I'm more than happy to sacrifice my queen, given half a chance. It's probably a load of rubbish again, but I'll still be happy to sacrifice it with a move like e3. And I thought this led to quite unclear play after. I mean, it's very complicated, but I mean, I can't play rook takes d8, e takes f2 check, king takes f2, rook takes d8, now knight takes a7, rook to d2 check. And I thought, well, you know, this is quite a messy position. White's king seems to be a bit of danger here. And I thought my pieces are active enough, and I've got some compensation on dart squares. I mean, it might just be that White's doing very well here, because you know, I could be in a bit of trouble with my c8 rook and my knight on c5. But I'll be quite happy. I was quite happy to go into something like this rather than give White some kind of slight advantage. So after queen to b4, that was if f5, knight to b5. Take on an e4, and that was rook takes d6, and then e3, that last line. I was more worried about knight takes d6 here, but maybe I was a bit pessimistic about my position. I mean, I've got to continue e3, and then I thought Rowson could just play bishop to g3 here. But maybe my position's not that bad. I mean, I forgot here, actually, that I could play the move queen to e7, which is a very good move. The idea of this is if White captures on c8, then I have knight to d3 check, winning the queen on b4. Maybe if I'd have seen this queen to e7 move, I might have played this line. And for example, something like queen to c3, I'm just going rook to c6, and if queen takes e5, rook to d8. And I think that Black's probably doing very well here. I mean, look at White's king, and my pieces all just seem to be very active. So I think this is quite a promising position here. So maybe after queen b4, maybe what I should play here is the move f5. It might be an improvement on the game. Anyway, I played a6, a bit passive. This gives White a chance to develop. So bishop to e2, and now I continued with pawn to f5. My opponent castled, and now I played a bad move. But we're going to put this game into two parts now, because I haven't really got enough memory, I'm afraid, to look at this game all in one chunk. So we've concentrated on the opening so far, and we've looked at some interesting ideas. In the second part of this DVD, which I'll post on the same post, we'll have a look at the rest of the game, and it gets very exciting. Lots of sacrifices and things coming up. So I'd recommend, if you've gone through my droning this far, you hang on out for another 15 minutes, and you watch the next part of the DVD. So cheers for that. I hope you enjoyed that first part. I will get back to you soon.